Hello and welcome to a history overview of the 5 kilometre West End shopping photo run. This will cover Tudor times 1560 and Victorian times 1860. Okay, so let's talk about the historical shopping of London. Let me give you some background to London and shopping going back in time. So we start off with a map of London in about 1540. Now, as we can see from this one, London was really where the City of London is today, and it was a walled city and it was at the confines of the City of London. And when we look at London in a bit more detail, you'll see that some of the old markets date back from that particular period. But if we look out towards the west, where Covent Garden is today, you can see it is just generally fields, and that would be the same where the district that you now are in, it was just fields. And the way that you used to do shopping in those days was that the shopkeepers and the purveyors of goods would always have come to you and would have shown you what they had, and you would have either bought it and they would have gone away and made it and brought it back to you. The other constriction on shopping was something which is called the sumptuary laws, and they were intended to regulate and reinforce social hierarchy and morals by restricting what people could buy in terms of clothing, food and luxury items. Now, this was very prevalent in the Elizabethan areas, as we can see here, when Shakespeare was alive, and it continued right up into the 17th century. And they even had a way of protecting the industry of the country. Now, England was known for its wool, and there was a particular law made at the time that on Sundays and holidays everyone had to wear a wool cap, and if you didn't wear it you were fined at the time 3 farthings, which was almost 3/4 of a penny. Now you can see the tradition of this still today in the flat caps, which are synonymous with Yorkshire. As we move into the Georgian period, which starts at the beginning of the 1700s, you'll see that the way that people used to buy is a lot different than they do today. It would have been almost like haute couture, so everything would have been made just for you. You would have had dressmakers, tailors, jewellers, and they would have created the outfit that you wanted. So you would have the patterns in terms of the pattern that you wanted it to look like. And then there was how you're going to choose the fabric, which would you go to your draperers for that. And haberdashery would be all the small items. And then you would have the milliner, which most people think as hats, but they were also looking at how you actually produced and manufactured the goods. Then you had the seamstress, who would sew it together, the tailor, who you would do the alterations, and obviously the cobblers, who you'd make the shoes and any of the other accessories. And they used to use these things called Pandora dolls, which allowed people to look at what the end result needed to look like, and that included the way your hair and your overall styling would have come together. But as we started to move into Victorian times, the shops became bigger. You move from this way of shopping where you'd go to a storefront, and that would be generally on the pavement, to actually going inside a large area, and they would start to look at the display space and the interior appearance, and you would get windows and glass being created and have window dressers to draw people in, which gave you the very start of the department stores. And in these sorts of areas they used to build other attractions, such as food areas, libraries even, and it was all developed to have a very polite society. So when we look at the end of Georgian times and the start of Victorian times, in this map from 1823, we can see how far London has developed. This area in red here is where the City of London and the walls of the city were still in existence. And this would have been the time when Queen Victoria was about 4 years old, and Wellington had only recently won the battle at Waterloo. Now at this time London was considered safe. You didn't need to live within inside the walls, and the population of London was growing. And you can see there's quite a lot of growth going out towards the west. The east is still very industrious, and you can see that by the sort of compactness of the houses. The south hasn't really been developed, and you've got places like Regent's Park and Hyde Park down in here, and there's nothing at all in terms of urbanisation, and this is Knightsbridge, where Harrods will eventually come. This part of London was also the area that was closest to the royal centre, so you had St James's Palace, Buckingham Palace, and the whole of the court area. So this was a natural area where the rich would have built many of their houses, allowed them to get out of the country, but also to go to work and to go to court. And this was one of the reasons why this part of London became synonymous with shopping. Now, if we look at the 5-kilometre historical photo run map, I've mapped the different runs to how they would have looked in around about 1850. But the interesting thing is looking at where the houses have been developed. So all this middle area, which is Mayfair, has all the large houses where people with money and influence would have had their residence. There is also Belgravia, which has just started to be built up, another very sought-after area. There's obviously the courts just by Westminster Palace, so this would have been all the courts, and Pall Mall down in here. This is Regent Street, and you'll see later this is sort of divides the sort of poorer industrial area of places like Soho with the affluent areas to the west. And also to the north of Oxford Street would have also had a number of newer and more upmarket developments. Now in this map I've turned things the other way around, so this is Piccadilly, this is Regent Street, this is going to be Oxford Street, and this is going to be Bond Street, which is where we'll start our run. Now just going back to the map in terms of what we're going to be seeing, this is about 5 kilometres, it's a bit shy of that really, but we'll be starting from here, coming down Bond Street, going across Piccadilly and back towards the finish.